Hey guys, welcome back to Reddit Me Please, where we give you all things Reddit. Today, we have a story about a guy who used 3D glasses on exam to pass. We'll get more on that story, but first, the soy lady. I recently did a story in here that reminded me of an MC I did years ago. This is weird, but an innocuous one, so I hope you enjoy. Many years ago, I worked at a small cafe. The customers were generally lovely, and it was not a very popular place due to it being in a weird location. So it was always slow and quiet. We often got regular customers in. When I started, I was warned about the soy lady. She was an older woman who came in to order an extra large takeaway cup of extremely hot soy milk. The staff would heat 2 cups of soy milk to the edge of burning, put it on the counter, and call her name. She would sit down at a table and wait for about 5 minutes after her name was called, then collect it. She then always came back to the counter after drinking half to complain the soy milk wasn't hot enough and demand for it to be redone for free. She also argued the cost, $3, relentlessly when she ordered at the counter. Our manager was a spineless weasel and hated customers getting Karen-y at the counter in case it caused other customers to think this is a bad place. So he always caved to her bizarre demands and would berate the staff in front of her so he would look good for being a tough manager. So shortly after I started, I met Soy Lady. It vaguely bothered me she was getting away with nasty comments to staff and an absolutely ludicrous addiction to lava hot soy milk, because what the F? But not enough to actually do anything about it. Until one day my manager decided that it was our fault we couldn't make the soy milk to her specifications, which apparently costed the business a lot of money, and he would take the full cost of her drink from our paycheck each time she returned it. Illegal? Yes. Immoral? Absolutely. Completely insane? You know it. So, the next day, my manager decided to take the morning off, presumably due to the mutinous mood of the cafe staff. Soy Lady rocks up, argues the cost of $3 as usual, pays, and then says, "Don't forget to make it hot this time," with a nasty smirk on her face. Filled with sudden inspiration, I asked, "As hot as I can make it?" She replied, "Yes, even though I doubt you can get it right." Neat. I insisted she wait at the counter because it was going to be ready immediately. Filled up a metal jug with soy milk, shoved it under the espresso steaming wand, and let it scream. You're supposed to adjust the jug so the milk spins, but I just let it boil, screaming loudly as I stared blankly right at her horrified face. For what felt like 2 minutes, though probably shorter, she started to look nervous halfway through and every customer was staring. 45 seconds in, she started to try to tell me it was done, but I shouted, "I think it could still get hotter," over the well of the burning soy milk. Finally, I took the wand off, which was now crusted brown with burnt milk, tripled up on the takeaway cups because it was unbearably hot, and then told we now charge $5 for cups of soy milk starting immediately, and we charge full price for refills, management's orders. Not true, but I was done by that time. Interestingly, I never saw Soy Lady again. You want it hot, you got it hot. Out of their paychecks? That's insane. OP really solved the problem, and I know the staff was thankful for it. Yet another new manager facing the consequences of their action story. I'll keep the details as vague as possible because I'm still with this organization. I work for a government department. We have offices and locations all over the state. I'm based out of a city that's about a 2 and a bit hour train to our head office. At the time, I was working in a team that had members working remotely all across the state, looking after policy, process, and quality assurance. Our old manager had gone and got himself promoted for being genuinely brilliant at his role. So our new manager, Steve, was hired in from the glorious world of banking, and he was there to whip us lazy public servants into shape. A few days after he began his role, he called us all to a teleconference to inform us he wanted all of us to be at the head office 8 a.m. tomorrow morning for an all-day in-person team meeting. He wanted to see us in meat space, to size us up, understand what we were doing, and see where we weren't keeping up with the private sector. As I mentioned, due to the nature of work we were doing, we were all across the state. So in-person whole team meetings were rare, and if they occurred at all, they were booked weeks in advance. We were all adept to video conferencing long before COVID. Some of us tried to tell our new high-flyer manager that almost none of us were in the same city as him, and to be there on such short notice would mean travel expenses, meal allowances, overtime, etc. He didn't seem to care, and told us in no uncertain terms to just be at the head office tomorrow at 8 a.m. before abruptly hanging up. Now, I should explain something. I'm one of the handful of union delegates in our department. I know our award back to front, specifically the sections dealing with travel, allowances, and overtime. So I engaged malicious compliance mode. If Steve wanted us there, fine, but it'll cost him. So I quickly went about emailing my team what Steve had done by requiring us to be in the head office at 8 a.m. and what to do. Because we have to travel outside our normal work hours, our workday clock started ticking the moment we left our homes and only stopped once we got home. Some of our team traveled overnight. They were entitled to overtime to travel, a dinner allowance, and accommodation for the night, and the same returning. As someone traveling in the morning, before 7 a.m., I was entitled to a breakfast allowance, lunch allowance, and if I got home after 9 p.m., a dinner allowance also. So I left my house at 5 a.m. to catch the only train that would get me there in time. The train was running slightly behind, but I made it in time. So my first 3 hours of my workday down, and I done no work. After a brief period of us introducing ourselves to Steve, he proceeded to spend the next 4 hours telling us about all the things he did at the bank, how he made so much money for them, where they sent him as a holiday bonus, how we're all stuck in the past in the public service, the work he's seen wasn't up to private sector standards, etc. He had all the cocksureness of a finance bro who had always fell upwards because others had picked up his slack. By 3 p.m., my entire team were into overtime pay territory, and Steve was just warming up with his non-charm offensive. Another 3 hours go by with Steve verbally patting himself on the back, deeply in love hearing his own voice, but all I hear is cha-ching, cha-ching. Steve decided that 5 p.m. was a good time to finish up. He stopped mid-sentence, looked at his watch, and unceremoniously said, "That's all for today, go home now," and walked out. After I and a few others gave a few awkward shrugs to each other, we all packed up and started to make our separate ways home after doing no work all day. I, myself, got to the train station pretty quickly and saw a train was leaving soon that would get me home around 8 p.m. Or I could catch the all stations train and get home closer to 9:30 p.m. You know what? No matter how fast I could run, I just couldn't catch that earlier train. Damn. I just have to catch that all stations train and be back on the clock for another hour and a half, plus have my dinner paid for. Such rotten luck. I submitted my claims the next day. 4.5 hours of double rate, my train tickets, my taxi fares to and from the station, my breakfast, lunch, and dinner allowances. For me alone, it was close to a $500 expense claim. The rest of my team followed suit and ensured they claimed everything too. Steve tried to fight us on approval for the claims, but quickly learned that unlike in the world of banking, most public servants are a union, and we'd raise living hell if he denied our award guarantee allowances. His all-day Steve Fest symposium blew a good $6,000 hole in his budget. Needless to say, while Steve was our manager, he never required us to attend an in-person meeting again. Video conferencing was just fine. He only lasted 6 months before leaving for new opportunities. He just went back to his old job at the bank. Guess he was the one who couldn't keep up. Take all the time you need. I would have done the same thing because it isn't fair to give short notice on a meeting when you live in a completely different city. And the arrogance of this guy. Ugh. What do you think about this malicious compliance? 3D exam cheating. Back in the 1980s, when I was in high school, we were not allowed calculators and we could only write pre-test notes on the front and back of a 3x5 note card. Formulas, important dates, and details, that sort of thing. The teacher would gloss over topics and then expect us to know details for the exam. So I used a red pen to fill out as much as I could, and then I used a blue pen to refill the same card as much as I could. We had to line up and show our teacher our 3x5 cards before the exam started. He sees mine and was like, "What the hell?" because it looked like a blur of red and blue ink scribbles. Other students saw and couldn't understand what I had done. Exam time starts and I whip out my 3D glasses. My teacher then comes over and demands that I not cheat. Since I technically only had one card, the same as everyone else, it was not cheating. He gave in and I passed the exam, but freaking hell did I have a headache after a 2-hour exam. This is new. Never heard of taking a test with 3D glasses. You think this is a life hack or not? Forced prayer? You asked for it. Some info for context. I have less than zero religiosity. I'm not saying God doesn't exist. I just haven't seen credible, replicable, and verifiable evidence that proves it's his/its existence. On to the story. My wife and I attended her sister's housewarming party earlier today. Her sister's mother-in-law, whom we are just meeting for the first time, is apparently a devout, outspoken, and annoyingly preachy Christian. The father-in-law is chill. The mother-in-law, let's call her Karen, asks for all the guests' attention and for some incomprehensible reason, orders me, as in no polite request, no please, etc., to pray for the food in which we are about to partake in. I guess I'm holding the fine cutlery while chopping up some Costco rotisserie chicken, which means leader of men in prayer. What the hell? Wife sister interjects. Some of our guests doesn't share the same faith that we have. If it's all right with you, can we just have a moment of silence so we can all offer thanks in our own personal ways? Before she could finish, Karen cuts her off and says, "It is only right to offer thanks and praise for our Lord and Savior, blah, blah, blah." Karen promptly points to me with her index finger and sternly commands, "Talk next. Lead the prayer." I say to myself silently, MC jackpot. Then out loud, "Praise be to Allah, for He has given us all the delicious food to consume and enjoy, except for the dishes with pork in it and all the alcoholic beverages, for Allah doesn't allow their consumption." At this point in my prayer, Karen turns around, grabs her husband by the arm, and leaves the shindig, mumbling something about all of us being heretics and such. Needless to say, everyone was giggling at her theatrics. Obviously, the drinks and food tasted way better after they left. Malicious compliant mode was activated. She should have led the prayer and things wouldn't have been so awkward, and she could have stayed. She should have listened to his sister-in-law. Write our reports using the language we speak at home. You got it, boss. For background, I teach English as a second language, TEFL. At the end of each semester, we're required to write class reports. Previously, we had to write our reports in English or Chinese so that they could be read easily by management. We're in China. Management decided that we shouldn't do this and instead write them using the language you could speak at home. Cue malicious compliance. Several of my colleagues are now writing reports in French, Russian, German, and Spanish. English is my first language, so I still write in English. However, to meet my boss's request, I'm now writing in British slang. Instead of writing Class A is very good, I now write Class A are the dogs, bullocks. For bad classes, I no longer write Class B is struggling with writing. I will write Class B shouldn't write their way out of a wet paper bag. My boss is now struggling but refuses to admit defeat. She's instead spending a lot of time using translation software to understand what we're writing. Management thought it'll be more fun to change things up now, huh? Now it's all chaos. OP really set malicious compliance mode up for the boss. Now she's struggling. Would you have gone about it this way? Well, that's all the time we have. If you'd like to hear another insane Reddit story, check out my latest video. With all that being said, I'll see you next time with more stories.